Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, Sedelia Njai. You are watching the Sedelia Njai Show. We got cut off there for a little bit, but we're going to jump right back into it. Our special guest this evening is Miss Sarah Jane Riegler. She is the founder of Afro House 2. She is a musician. She's a DJ. She's a fundraiser, and we're gonna get a chance to talk. We were in the midst of talking about how we've been coping with the Black Lives Matter movement. We're going to talk a little bit with her about her role as a non-Black ally. We're also going to get to know more and learn more about her as a creative. It's going to be a really exciting discussion. So I'm happy. Thank you guys for tuning in and joining me this evening. Let's go ahead and bring Sarah in.
And we're back.
Yes, and we're back in business. Welcome back again. We want to thank you so much for being here on the show. We were in the midst of I want to just jump right into it. We're in the midst of talking a little bit about the roles that we can play or that we're trying to play during this Black Lives Matters movement. And I know that one of the roles that you've been actively taking, and we'll talk about that more, not only in, again, day-to-day life of supporting Black or African artists and putting them at the forefront. We're going to talk about that later. But you're also a fundraiser. You're also taking initiatives, to contribute to this movement in an impactful way. So before you tell us about the fundraiser, can you just go ahead and tell us a little bit more about your role? I think people want to know, like, as a non-Black ally, what responsibility do you feel towards this movement?
I feel a lot of responsibility. Me especially, I am American. I'm
Yes.
from an extremely conservative, all-white, Trump-filled town, a Confederate flag. I have the luxury and privilege of knowing my ancestry deeply into my mom's a genealogist. So like for me, I actually like on paper for sure confirmed my ancestors were slave owners. It's not like I'm just guessing that. It's 100%. And I grew up in like I said, my like extended family were just dropping N-words all the time. And so for me, from day one, it's been like I felt allergic to it. I'm just like, this is unacceptable. I feel extremely personally invested in this. And then furthermore, as somebody who has been creating my music career in recent years, almost entirely off of Black music and Black culture, I mean, to me, it's not even an option. It's just like, if I'm going to take up space, I better be creating and providing space and support tenfold.
Yeah.
In any way I can.
Yeah, I think that's really incredible. And I know that a lot of people know you intimately in the community and you have a close relation with, as we say, the Black and African community. And every time like anyone, everyone is highly respected, highly loved, highly appreciated. I really love the unity that we have as creatives here in Toronto in our niche. And how we support each other. And I think that that's an exemplary model. That's what it's supposed to look like. And you and I being Americans, we noticed that wasn't necessarily the case in the States. Right.
Nope.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm really grateful for that. But how difficult has it been maybe in times like having this conversation with your white counterparts? What does that look like? How do you also make sure that I feel like you're in a position where you might even be a little more knowledgeable. You've taken that initiative, you've immersed yourself in that culture and in that understanding. So what does that conversation look like when, you try to explain this to your white counterparts?
I've definitely had some practice. So besides just like personally immersing myself, traveling, being engaged in part of different communities, even on an academic level, I did a lot of studying and had a lot of practice in the academic sphere, working at U of T, being a TA and having to facilitate a lot of these types of discussions professionally.
Yeah.
But to me, there's a lot of things. It's really important to not have people shut down immediately. Like it takes the
Ooh,
extra
that's hard.
emotional,
Yeah.
yeah, it takes the extra emotional labor, which I mean, that's just what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But to have extreme compassion, even if you want to just be like, are you effing kidding me? Like, how do you not get this? But like, you can't show up like that, because if you show up like that, they're going to shut down and the conversation goes nowhere. So it's like having that extra compassion, extra patience, really. And I think it's important to be like, I'm not perfect. I've learned a lot of what I've learned from messing up and making mistakes. We're not looking for perfection here. We just need to make
Yes.
moves, and we need to make
Yes.
moves now. We need to make moves millions of years ago, but like we need to make moves now.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
willing
it's
to grow and, like you said, make those mistakes.
yeah, and one of the big things that's been coming up is like helping. It's like decolonizing the mind first off, and then
Oh,
filling it back
yeah.
up with proper information. And for people to, there's so many like white people that are at different places with this. So you have people
Right.
that like really want to help, or like the white liberals that really want to help, but they don't know what to do. There's people who are moderates and like don't really feel a type of way. And then there's people who are like actively racist and conservative. So there's
Right.
a lot of different approaches, I feel like, for every single person. And a big thing is especially on more of the spectrum, I think, of like white liberals, is really explaining things like impact and intention. Like, what is your intention, but how is it actually impacting people? And people have to
Yeah,
just
that's what I
get
guess I
that
was going to
clear.
say. Because intentions, we can all have good intentions, but it
Yeah.
doesn't mean the way we choose to demonstrate that intention is what's best.
And your intentions are coming from miseducation. People have to understand, and maybe it can feel overwhelming, but maybe it can also feel a little bit relieving that it's like you've literally been misinformed.
Mm-hmm.
So some of it's not even your fault, but still, even if like things can't aren't necessarily our fault. Like what our
Mm-hmm.
ancestors did aren't necessarily our fault.
Right.
However, we're benefiting from this
From
privilege
that.
our whole life.
Right.
And whether we think it's our fault or not, it's like we still have to do something about it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. If at least if we want to live in this world peacefully. That's why I say
100%.
racism is everyone's problem because we're all living on this planet.
Yes,
Yeah,
100%.
absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, that's been. I feel like even us as Black, for sure, a lot of us we've had to unlearn. We are unlearning and relearning every day. That was a huge part of like me trying to process my emotions, as I say, right? Was that like everything that I basically, even the fact that even my definition of success, that's changed with growth and spirituality and maturity and all those things. But I'm at an advantage because I'm a creative, so God speaks to me. But for those who aren't in that position per se, right? um I had to think about like everything that I've thought, or like the way that I've functioned, especially in terms of down to what it means to be successful, comes from a Eurocentric standpoint. And I was having an existential crisis in the midst of quarantine, and I thought it was about quarantine, but it wasn't about isolating. I don't mind being alone. I only realized now that it was because I couldn't, no matter what I was doing, I was rejecting it. That's what leaders, that happens. I was rejecting the system and the structure, and I couldn't find. I fit in. Yeah, obviously, but again, like it just. I was like, for some reason, I can't, like, the plug won't fit. It's not working. I'm trying, but I'm doing it. I'm making it look like I'm doing it, but I'm in my spirit. I'm not okay. I'm not at peace. And I
Yeah.
realized that was probably because I was never even really how I was meant to live, or my ancestors didn't live that way. So that's probably
Mhm.
why I'm rejecting and didn't even know where that was coming from.
100. I mean, I struggle with so much about self. For me and all of us, we've been programmed in this very capitalist society that your
Yes.
self-worth is equal to productivity. But what is
Yes.
productivity? So
Yes.
first off, that's messed up. Your self-worth is related to who you're
Yes.
doing, what you're doing versus who you're being, not who.
Mm,
And then
mm,
secondly, what is productive? And that's also a very patriarchal thing too,
ooh,
very
what is
hyper
that?
masculine.
Yes.
Like we consider things that are like work, our definitions of work, as like things that make money to be productive, but like emotional labor or emotional growth or like
Mm,
decolonizing the mind, these more like ethereal, I would say more, if we're talking about feminine, masculine energy, the things that fall into typically the more like feminine end of the spectrum. And I don't mean like literally male, female. I mean more conceptually like yin
I
yang kind of,
understand.
it's
Absolutely.
like, it's like the things that are more feminine are not valued in this society. So we're also
Mm,
trying, like, this is so intersectional. It's not just race. It's literally, it's a patriarchy too, which
yeah,
we
yeah.
experience in all society and all across the board, most I'd say, if not all places. So it's a lot of like the standards we've set for ourselves are just so, they're so harsh and they're not flexible. They're not fluid. They're not real.
So
They're not,
hard.
and these are all really, I mean, think about how quickly society is changing, how quickly technology is changing, and yet we're holding true to these standards and models that are extremely outdated.
I was
So,
even just really, you mentioned technology. I'm sorry to stray.
It's
I
all
know we
good.
have a structure and we're here, but
I'm here for the ride. Just take me wherever.
yeah, I'm like, just because lately I feel like it's so important. So part of what I do is I have to let the spirit move me. When it's moving me, I'm like, let's go with it. Let's see what happens here. But you just mentioned technology real quick, and that made me think, like, at the beginning of quarantine, I remember being a little afraid. I would consider myself someone who's technologically savvy. I think a lot of us in our generation have to be, at least at a minimum, because it's a part of our day-to-day and integral life. But I remember, thinking like, wow, if some people are like apt or have, this ineptitude to understand technology, how to use it at its full capacity, they're fucked. Like in the future. And I remember thinking about that and being really, that was one of the first like things that made me anxious about quarantine. That like now I'm being forced, like imagine people who are used to going into an office and going to work and they never even maybe use Zoom. Now they got to figure it out just so they can be a part of the workforce, So we were kind of like thrown into, and again, we're resilient. We've made that through, but that just made me like think about that. I don't know. I thought that I was like, technologically advanced, but even still, I realized it was so much that even I had to learn, and that's still happening.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
I think that with everything that's going on too, a lot of people forget as artists. I know I've been struggling with social media a lot. We need it, especially in our fields. I think that it was originally intended as a tool to help, but it hasn't been serving as much. I think that we got lost in it. We got a little bit lost in it, and I know that it is a huge part of our society. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that it's healthy, like for it to be such a dominating force in our life?
I mean, short answer, no, but I mean, it's
Yeah,
complicated. It's complicated.
yeah,
It's everything in life to me is gray. It's here and there. I think that, we use it a lot as creatives. It's like this, on the positive side, this kind of platform. They call like a lot of this stuff kind of like the great equalizer of like you don't have to you don't depend on like record companies or something anymore. However,
mm-hmm.
now there's just so much noise that how do you get above it? So like from a business standpoint, it's like, look, I've been able to really build a lot of different brands and things for myself, primarily just using social media as marketing, and that's something that I can just immediately access. So it's like on the one hand, it's a great way to reach people. But I mean, there's just so many downsides. It creates incredibly unrealistic expectations. It's not really reality. It can just be, and in how it's showing up now in the Black Lives Matter and anti-racism like movement, it's both, I think, too, where it's like we're able to disseminate information and knowledge quickly. And that's
Right,
information like educational information, that's information like movements are happening, and like it's like we
right.
can really quickly disseminate, which is amazing. But then you
Yeah,
also have people disseminating really brutal videos, and people don't want to, and it's like you don't really get like the whole trigger warning consent thing of like, do you really want to see that without being prepped for that? So that's the kind of thing
exactly.
where it's like, it's, and now we have this interesting pressure of like, I have to be on social media because I need to say something because silence is compliance, which is true.
Yeah,
You can't be silent. However, it needs to also be balanced with like we can't all be burnt out, and we're constantly needing to be on this thing,
yeah,
and away from ourselves, away from nature, away from our families, away from like we have to balance this. It's not
absolutely,
sustainable that way if we're not.
absolutely. And I
It's not
know that
sustainable.
yeah, I know that you've really taken that to heart because we've spoken and you say, yeah, I need a little bit of break. Even before this movement, like in the beginning of quarantine, like I need a little bit of a moment because I think a lot of people like think that artists that we don't burn out, that we just like have all this energy and yeah, we're bursts of light, darn it. We always will be, okay? But
Yeah.
shit, honey, even a light needs to be plugged up to function or even batteries die. Hello?
Yeah,
So,
man.
so can you tell us a little bit about like what was making you feel, that you were experiencing that burnout, and what was the most useful tool I think artists could benefit from knowing? What was the most useful tool for you coming out of that? How do you recharge?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things leading to burnout. For me, it's just a lot of it was just hustling as a full-time artist and entrepreneur for a while now and
Right.
feeling and having I overcommit. I am a chronic overcommitter. One of
Yeah.
those things is that like I'm finally in an incredible city, You know, I come from a very small town with 1,000
Right.
people and no options in culture to being in this dream place. And so I want to say yes to everything. And I have
Oh
a
yeah,
million ideas. That's like the double-edged sword of being creative. You have a million ideas,
for
but it's hard to
sure.
know which ones to go for. So a lot of
And
the
to
burnout is my own
what do
damn.
you call canalize it? Oh, canalize. I'm speaking French. Like to put it in structure. I'm like canalize. That's not a word. Canalize. Yeah. How do you like structure it and like figure out what to do first? Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of it was just like I was running 4 different event series this year. One
Yes.
was weekly, three were monthly, some were like quite major scale, and so a lot of it's just like me taking on too much. Also, just like Toronto being an expensive city and needing to hustle, and artists just not being paid very much, and like it's so precarious that you're like you just load up your damn plate because you're like I also don't know, like I have like 20 different plates I'm spinning and I'm not really sure which one of these is going to work or get me. And by work, I mean give me money so I can like pay my bills. So a lot of
Right.
it's just like this necessity. It's just like it goes on forever. And so I was feeling a lot of burnout from that. And then from social media, it's just like I don't have a very big personal business divide on social media. I have
Okay.
I have 6 different Instagram accounts, not all of
What?
which I use
What?
a
What?
lot.
What?
Yeah, different
Girl, I'm
events.
struggling managing my one. How do you have six?
This is why burnout happens.
Oh my
Not all of those
God.
are like super active. Like only a few were like I'm like pretty active, maybe 3 or 4.
And guys,
Um,
creating content is super stressful, especially when you're a professional. I just want to say.
and you know, for me, it's like my DMs are full. It's like it's literally my job to know people as a curator
Literally.
and an
Yes.
artist. My job is
Yes.
to become popular and to
Yes.
so I'm like trying. It's just like it's overwhelming to literally get through all my DMs sometimes. And but it's also like you don't want to. I talk to my other artist friends like this too, who have a lot of different projects. And you're like, I kind of feel like an ass for complaining that all these people want to message me, but it's super overwhelming.
Absolutely.
So but because
Absolutely.
I feel this pressure, it's like I also like I'm a person that likes to give and I want to give my attention to everybody. And even professionally, I
Mm-hmm.
want to give my attention to people. I want to respond back to them because it's also in my professional best interest, on top of personal interest of
Right.
wanting to do that. So that was a lot of the burnouts, just a lot of that. And
Yeah.
for me too, like I have really a lot of really late nights. There's a lot of
Yeah.
times I'm the first person to get there and the last person to leave at any of my
Yeah.
events. There were I was pulling like 20-hour nonstop days for a couple with this event, Urban Jungle, I was doing a few times. And then I
Wow.
had the Afro House anniversary. That was also a lot of work
Of
and like another
course.
20-hour day.
Oh my God, that party was crazy. Oh my God. Oh my God. Like what? What? I remember like people were the security guards got so scared because the crowd was like bombarding them. They're like, no, no, we gotta shut it down. No more people in or out. It was a packed house. Well,
It was a madhouse.
congratulations to that. But yeah.
It was a madhouse. So it was just a lot of that. A lot of like I'm like I turned 30 last year. I'm turning 31 soon, and
Oh, let me cry, girl. I'm almost 30, girl.
you know, your body, I'm not a 21-year-old that can spring back as much as I used to. And girl, let me tell you, I put my body through a lot in my younger years.
I know that's
So,
right.
so you know, it's a lot of those things. But working in nightlife, you know, it's like
Yeah.
it's weird because I work in nightlife, but I do all the administrative stuff. So like I still kind of operate in regular
Mm.
hours. And then I
Hmm.
also have to be at places
That's
really
hard.
late.
That's really hard. People either do one or the other. You're right. That's an interesting balance.
Yeah, so that was the cause of the burnout. And part two of
Yes.
the question was, how did I deal with it?
Yes.
I
What
think.
was the most useful tool you found or method you used to get yourself out of that? Because you
Yeah.
have to remember that because this is gonna happen again, but you need to know how to, bounce back and forth, right? You should expect that you're gonna have these moments of burnouts, but how do you come out of that? You need something that works for you. What worked for you?
Yeah, it's a couple things. One is just like creating boundaries my own self about like
Mm-hmm.
discerning what are yeses and saying a lot of no's. That's a big one is like controlling what you is on your plate. From a health
Without
standpoint,
feeling bad, right? Or guilty.
without feeling bad, that's the key. Or being fearful. Like for me, it was a lot of fearful of just being like, well, what if I pass up on this opportunity and that's money? And it's not because it's like a
Mm.
survival thing
Right.
coming from artists and entrepreneurial. And my parents, you know, when I was born, my parents were on welfare. Like that was, I did not come from a wealthy family. So I think I have a lot of money blocks and fears. So sometimes I make decisions from that, like
Mhm.
I'll overwork myself. Um, so that's one thing. Yeah. So for me, going back to the basics of just physical health, like checking back in, I did a really extensive, uh, plan with an amazing friend of mine who's an herbalist and a nutritionist. So I was on like a long laundry list of different supplements, teas, and tinctures of different herbs.
Nice.
And doing things like, I always come back to like yoga, meditation, just breathing, like getting into your body, making sure your sleep is on point, like making sure you're eating like nutritionally dense food as you can. Like
Yeah.
that is to me for burnout, like that's it. Like you gotta turn to your body first and really go heavy, and think about those basic things before
And
you
like you
proceed.
said, I think a lot of people have, like you said, a negative mindset when it comes to rest, because again, rest equals unproductivity. So that's a big thing. I value my rest very much so. We have a mutual friend, Safi, who and she and I spoke a lot about rest, because sometimes I enjoy my sleep. Like I enjoy it a lot. People don't understand where that comes from, but I can still be productive and sleep well. Like I don't have to like cut the amount of hours I need to sleep just to accomplish something. I just set boundaries and I set a schedule and a structure. But a lot of it is, again, we don't prioritize a rest, right?
No,
Like
and again, it's a lot about the guilt and the shame around
absolutely.
that rest, like and fear. Like for me, it's a fear. Again, this fear from coming from a place of wanting security and stability of like, well, I got to keep hustling, and fear that I'm going to become relevant, fear that
Yes.
everyone else is going to get ahead of me.
I'm gonna
Um,
miss out. Yeah,
I'm
for
gonna
sure.
miss out.
For
Yeah,
sure.
and it's in a city like Toronto where it's like there's endless opportunities and it's like endless possibilities. It's really the
Yeah.
possibilities because it's this idea in our head that like there's so many possible things I could be doing and I'm losing or missing out by not trying to just constantly be out there. And it's like we really, really put this like hustle grind culture on such a pedestal, and I'm really fucking over it.
Yeah, no, I, me too. You and I both, honey. But this is part of why we decided to do our own things and live our own lives. There's challenges with that, but there's also an incredible freedom that comes with that. How would you advise someone to not become completely consumed with social media? Is it structured? Did you already mention that?
I haven't, but definitely having boundaries on yourself. So for me, I know that I will feel extremely overwhelmed and anxious if the first thing I do when I wake up is just open my phone and see all my notifications. So I literally create a bubble around sleep time. So like I turn my phone on airplane mode. So I'm someone who showers at night. That's just become my routine. I like to like
Yeah.
take really candlelit, nice, like steamy
Yes.
showers at
Okay.
night.
Get your sexy time
What?
personal love on. I'm here for
Why
it.
not? If you can take a sexy candlelit shower every night, why go back? I have like a whole Spotify playlist
Absolutely.
that's my nighttime shower playlist. It's nice. I'm gonna do that, live your best life. Find moments of joy when you can, So that's a boundary for me is like after I take my shower at night, like phone's on airplane mode. I don't look at it. I don't touch it, like, and I have that boundary for myself. Because otherwise, sometimes I just like get lost in like a scrolling spiral, and then it's like, oh, it's
Yes,
2 in the morning. Where did that time
exactly.
go? Not helpful. And then I also have another boundary when I wake up. It's like I need to like journal, do yoga, do whatever I need, like at least stretch. Like I have to do these things for myself so I can ground and center myself before I interact with the outside world. And sometimes it's not for a while. Sometimes, like if you call me at like 9 to 11, even noon, like you're literally gonna get my voicemail because
That's
that's
setting
just what I
boundaries. You're
need to do.
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That's so important to do. But back to that question specifically, I know people are like, well, how do I balance like, being on social media all the time, even though I know it makes me feel some type of way. And I tell them you should assess how you're feeling. If you feel overwhelmed or emotional every time you leave social media, that's probably an indication you need to take a little bit of a break.
Yeah.
Right? So what would you recommend? Again, everything's balanced, but do you have any specific recommendation for what you've done of like how much time is maybe enough to not be on social media, or should you just get on for the important things or every once in a while? Like what did that look like for you? How did you
Yeah, for sure. I started noticing like why, like asking yourself every time you open the app, why? Am I doing this because I'm bored and need to just hold space right now? And if that's why, if I'm just because I need to pass time, maybe I could just breathe instead. Maybe I could, like that's other things I've done to kind of like control it. Now I try to be really go in there kind of task oriented, like, okay, I'm going to go check my DMs and do this, or I'm going to post these posts. I try to not give myself much time of just like, let me just like kind of be on here and like scroll around a little bit. Because I know for me personally, it doesn't serve me. Rarely does it serve me.
Exactly. Exactly. You know what? We're gonna shift gears and go right into, because everyone's like, that's a dying question. Everyone's like, how? Well, we're not gonna get there. I'm like, first we need to understand how you got into music. Everyone's like, how did this amazing? You're one of my favorite DJs, by the way. I have you and Dami are definitely in my top tier. I love you, Dami, Curator Flight, Monzi. Of course, I'm biased, but you guys are in my top 5 tiers. I love Owa Boa as well. I like her work.
She's
But
great.
yeah, you guys are in my like top 5 tiers. I'm in my top 5, and everyone obviously is like, how did this white girl become so dope at Afro beats in the house and DJ? Like, what? How did that? That's the whole story. But we're not gonna jump there yet, girl. First, just tell us a little bit about how you got into music, because I know you have a really interesting musical background, and everyone needs to understand that life has steps. We try to just jump to the vision and just see it, and that's great. Visualize, see your future, but understand that there are steps to get to that. Okay, so don't feel weird or crazy. Things don't happen overnight.
They do not. They do not. Yeah.
They
My
really do.
story, it's a long, I'm going to try to be as concise as possible and just give you a
Yeah,
little
just tell
clarity.
us a quick version of how you got into music. When did you first become interested in music, and maybe talk about your musical education?
For sure. I literally started playing music like in middle school in band. Like you can choose to do band or something else. And I was like,
Right.
I guess I'll do band, like whatever. And I wanted to play saxophone, but I had grown
Wait,
up from,
sidebar real quick. Sorry. Look at where life takes you. Like, we had band or theater options. Like, you chose band, I chose theater. Look, I'm a spoken word artist today. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I wasn't really giving too much thought about it, but I have been. It's important to mention what I've been doing before music. So
yeah.
when I was 3 years old, my parents put me into dance classes. So I've been on
Okay.
stage since I was 3, and all of my like Leo extra self, like I've been a performer since I was 3. I was
Yes.
shit at ballet, but I was very good at tap dancing. So that's where
Okay.
the rhythm
I
started
can
for me.
see it.
Yeah, that's where rhythm started for me. It was very embodied. And then I, joined band in middle school. They made me be a percussionist. I didn't want to, but I had really good rhythm. So they're like, you're a percussionist, you're gonna play drums.
Oh,
Yeah.
look at that. It's like, this one girl got rhythm. We got to put her on percussion.
So I started playing percussion. I did not care about it at all for a couple years, and then I got serious in high school because I started playing in this Scottish Highland band, which is like really big in Ontario. Like it's
Okay.
literally like traditional Scottish music with bagpipes, and they have these crazy drum lines. Like
Nice.
so. So I was playing snare drum on this drum line, and I got really seriously into that. So think like Nick Cannon drum line, but with bagpipes. It's similar, but it's different. um,
Gotcha.
so I got really serious around then. I was like, okay, this is something, and I could because I was starting to play professionally with this group. So I started when I was 15, playing like parades and playing gigs, and I was like, I love this, and I loved the discipline. I think I found a lot of like I can be a very anxious person, and I find so much calm in rhythm because it's like you're like controlling time. Like you're sitting there and you're trying,
Mm,
especially with this like marching band music, it's so precise. Like everything needs to look identical. Everyone, there's so much happening and it needs to be so together. And you're so in the present moment and you're so just like task oriented of like it's right or it's wrong. It's black and white. It's just like
mm-hmm.
it's all together or it's not. So I really loved it. I was practicing like 2 3 hours every single day by myself, and I really liked it.
Wow.
So I knew I wanted to take on music as a serious thing. So throughout high school, I started taking jazz drum set lessons. I really loved playing drum set. I ended up taking music theory lessons because I knew I was going to start doing an undergrad degree in classical music.
Okay. And that's
So
how you moved to Toronto for this, eventually going to school.
I moved to Toronto for my master's, so I did an undergrad. Hi, Raul. Oh my gosh, another amazing drummer, tabla player in the chat. So I started a classical music degree, even though like my musical interests in high school, like I was in like punk, metal, hardcore, scenes. Like that's the
Okay.
concert I was going to. But
Gotcha.
but I went to school for classical music. So I was in a classical music conservatory for 5 years,
Nice.
doing what you see in an orchestra, crash
Hmm.
cymbals, symphony, snare drum. You know, I had to be able to play
I love it.
Beethoven, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So that was like a majority of my life. And we were also really into experimental music. I've always been a very eccentric person. Like
Hmm.
in high school, different hair color every single, month, new holes in my face all the time, like I've always been an
Straight
eccentric
up of
weirdo
expression, darn it.
expression and an anarchist. I've always loved anarchy.
Look at you riling them up, troublemaker.
I was. But I was also low key super
We
wholesome
need
and like
those.
very
That's a
good at
role
school.
to play in society. We need those in life.
More of a shit disturber than an anarchist.
Yeah. Well, no,
Just
like
like,
I said, there's even this organogram that we've seen even in this movement. Everyone has a role to play, and the disruptors sometimes are necessary.
yeah, you got to have someone not afraid to speak up and speak out and be like, nope. And where
Absolutely.
I'm from, that's important. Like I said, I definitely
Sure.
stood out and stuck out, and that was something that, it stayed with me. Yeah, so that's like my random until undergrad music
Okay.
thing
Then you, from undergrad, you moved on over
to
into
Toronto. But before I did
I don't know.
that, I was getting really into non-Western music. So even though I was studying like European classical music, I wasn't like I have a place in my heart for it, but it's never really what resonated with me personally. Like I never
Oh,
wanted to play
me
in an
and oh my God.
orchestra.
Oh, I love it. I absolutely love it.
I love it too. I love listening to it, but I knew as like a performer that wasn't really what I wanted to be doing.
Makes
It's like
sense.
super cutthroat, and it's just like this is right, this is wrong, which I
Sure.
kind of felt comfort in, but there's no room for
Yeah.
really a lot of
Creative
expression,
expression. Sure.
and it's very like intense and regimented, and yeah, I got really, really, really. I went to a music festival. I went to a lot of music festivals growing up
Okay.
in Michigan, and there was a West African drum and dance ensemble playing music
Okay.
primarily from Guinea,
Okay.
like djembe and dundu music, and then they had a bunch of dancers with them. And so I
Nice.
was like 18 or 19, and I saw that, and I was just like, "Excuse me, like
Yeah.
what?" It was just
What
like,
is this beautiful world? What happened to my whole life? I
yeah. So I
haven't
was
lived until this moment.
like, exactly. So like I was immediately hooked, and I at that festival that weekend went to like the head drummer, and I was like, bruh, like how do I do this? How do I sign up? Like what? How do like I want this? What is this? Like um.
I
So
want
yeah,
it.
I started taking djembe lessons with him in the summertime. I'd have to drive like 4 hours each way, but I was just like I was literally just so committed. I was like, this I have to know more. There's very
Right.
few resources in Michigan for drumming from Guinea, but um, but I knew I loved it, and I think it's like
Yeah.
we hear a lot. It felt very familiar for me.
Sure.
Like it's like such beautiful rhythmic like complexity. I like as a percussionist and drummer, I was just such a nerd for it. I was like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
But we it also felt familiar because it's West African
Hmm.
music. It's the roots
Hmm.
of American music, so it's like it's new, but it's also familiar at the same time.
Hmm.
Hi,
Hmm.
Mikey.
Hmm.
Marampo, 8 to same. Good to see you. Um, so from there, I just knew like obviously I had very limited resources in Michigan. So after my drum teacher actually he moved back to Boston, I was like, okay, well I need to go to the continent. I need to study
Right.
abroad. That was just got to do it.
Yeah. Naturally, if you have that love of it, you need to take that to another level. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I was supposed to go to Senegal. Funny enough,
Ah, dang. No, especially
shout
when you
out
like Jimmy,
Senegal.
don't break my heart. Girl. You, honey, you don't know Jimmy till you go to Senegal. Ah, hey.
Yeah, so I was supposed to live in Dakar and be there and study music. I wanted to be in a francophone. I wanted to be in Mali or Guinea, but
Right,
this was 2010, 2011.
right,
Things were not super stable and safe, especially in northern Mali. So my school was just
sure,
like, nope, can't go there.
right.
Because I was under like the constraints of being a university student, so I had
Of
to
course,
comply with my school.
of course, of course, of course.
Um, So I was supposed to go to Dakar because I'm like, well, that's between Ghana and Senegal. Like, obviously, Senegal would be a closer fit to Guinea or Mali as far as
For
culturally and
sure. And would you
geographically.
wanting that francophone influence, and the origins of djembe originate in
Of
Senegal,
course.
so that would have been more pertinent to your studies. I get it.
Right. Francophone. I needed an Islam credit for my religion degree, and so I wanted to be in a Muslim country. I
Uh,
wanted that. I wanted, you know,
yeah.
and then I had a
Oh, yes, so
really
girl, you can come to Senegal now. You know me. We out. Let's go. Okay.
I'm here for it. Like once those borders open, let me tell you. So I ended up in University of Ghana in Accra like totally an accident. I actually never applied for that program. I only applied for the Senegal one, but there was a
Okay.
very like Africa is a country moment that happened with the
Got you.
administration.
Sure.
They were like, "We're not sending musicians to Senegal, but you can go to Ghana because it's the same." And I'm just like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I was upset, and I'm like, okay, I mean, not only is the music and culture entirely different, languages, obviously,
Mhm.
it's also Anglophone and Christian, and like that's not what I'm trying to also learn. I'm trying to learn French
Mhm.
and Islam. So
Mhm.
it was one of many Africa as a country moments I've experienced from
Right.
like a lot of sources of power. So I ended up in Ghana. I obviously made the best of it, and
Of course.
that was
Because it was still a nice opportunity to be able to go for sure.
of course, I made the best of it and like learned a lot, and it obviously forever changed and impacted me. And it's funny because now I had no idea I was going to like move to Toronto after that, but there's such a huge Ghanaian population here that I played in a lot of Ghanaian like events and with a drumming
Right.
group in Toronto because
Right.
of my knowledge of Ghanaian music. So I ended up working out.
Mm.
Hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so, what did you study at U of T? What was that like? When you went then, you did your master's program there, correct?
Yeah, so after I came home from Ghana, I was studying like percussion there, xylophone and drums, and doing like field work and a lot of interviews. And then I came back to Michigan, finished my degree, and then I knew I wanted to do a master's. I thought I was going to do a PhD and be a professor. That was the original plan. So I'm like,
Right.
okay,
Because I know how much
gotta
you love
level up.
academia, but sometimes their purpose is elsewhere.
Right.
For now,
So
for you.
yeah,
For now.
yeah. So I moved to Toronto. I knew I wasn't going to go. I was like, I'm only going to go to grad school if they pay
Yeah.
me.
Okay.
That's the only way I'm going. Can't go into more debt. So, so I applied to 8 schools. I got 3 full rides, and so had the luxury of choosing between 3 places, and I turned down my dream school in Connecticut. That was like the top program in ethnomusicology, the random field I did my master's in.
Okay.
And moved to Toronto because I wanted to be in a multicultural city. It was
Yeah, it
very
also
safe
kind of feels
here.
like a contradiction to study ethnomusicology in a very specific environment.
Yeah, well, I had only lived, besides when I lived in Ghana, like I had only lived in like pretty much small town Michigan with like very little diversity or culture. And I was
Right.
like, I cannot do more of that. I haven't,
Right.
this
Right.
makes no sense for what I
Like you
want
said,
to do.
defeats the purpose. Yeah.
Yeah, so I chose Toronto, and I mean it was also things like safety and health insurance and like I don't have to. I'm preaching to the choir here. So
Absolutely. Hello. We know it.
yep,
We know how that process is like for sure.
yeah. So that's how I
That's
got
so
here. That's
amazing.
kind of
And
my
for those
musical
who may
journey.
not understand, what did the ethnomusicology studies comprise of?
So ethnomusicology is a real thing. It's pretty much anthropology of music. So it's very
Okay.
similar to anthropology where like you're doing field work. It's a lot of reading and writing and like you're also it's really important that you go and like live and immerse yourself. Like
Okay.
you're immersing yourself. And it's mostly in non-Western music. It's not only in non-Western music, but it's mostly. It used to be hella colonial and problematic, still is a little bit, because it was more like, let's go see how like the natives live, and it was like hella problematic. But now,
Right.
the degree I went, my program at U of T was like extremely like decolonize your mind. Like they were super lefty in a good way. So it
Well,
was a
it's
really
Canada. I'm
critical
not
look.
surprised.
Yeah. So yeah, we were looking at things like you're looking at like music and religion, music and colonialism, music and politics, music and gender, music
Nice.
and all these different aspects. You're looking at how music affects that and how that affects music essentially.
That sounds very interesting, though. That's really incredible, and I think that you'll help us understand how that served you later on. Again, every experience that we have in life serves a purpose. We might not see it in that moment, but that's all a culmination of who you are today and why you're so amazing, right? So that's really incredible. You also mentioned a lot based on our conversation that you developed a huge like interest in world religion, and I'm curious about what pushed that interest.
For sure. It was the same kind of interest that pushed me to do ethnomusicology, like instead of doing like another degree that in more like performance, like I had already done. And that's just humans are just so weird and interesting, you know, like we're complex
Weird and
beings.
interesting, though.
And so for me, I think too, like, you know, coming from such a small town with very little access to any diversity, it's like I always was like, geez, the world is so big, and I know that the narratives and things I'm hearing can't be the only thing. So I've always just wanted to know, I've always been like super interested in exploring difference. I've been like, always been like, I'm so curious. I was like a curiosity, a genuine curiosity of like, how do other people think? How do they live? I know that this isn't the only way. Like, even though we grew up in America and we were told that we were the best and like at everything and the only way to do everything, it's like I was always like, I don't know if I agree with that. So for me, I knew I really wanted to do something kind of in the humanities, generally speaking. And I thought that world religion would be the most interesting way to explore that, to explore just different ways of being, doing, really just like looking into different people's worldviews.
Okay.
And I've always been a little bit of a mystical being myself, a little bit, I mean, a
Right.
lot of it. So I had,
I can't wait for us to meet the witch, darling. I know she talks about that all the time. I'm so excited. You guys are in for a treat. I don't know about you guys, but I'm enjoying this conversation so much. Again, you're watching the Sedalia and Jai Show. Thank you for joining us. We're here with our special guest, Sarah Jane Riegler. And our conversation is, we're just getting started, okay? We're just getting started. We really are. And we've already touched on some really incredible things and incredible topics. Again, those of you, I see you in the comments and I see the love. I see you guys here. Unfortunately, I always give this as a disclaimer. You guys know what's up on the Sedalia and Jai Show. This is a structured platform. This is a talk show. This is not your traditional Instagram platform. So I will not verbally acknowledge you, but you know I love you. All right? And if you don't, you better ask somebody. All right, very good. So I think most people, like, again, know you for your Afro House events, but you're also involved in several different projects, which you already touched on a little bit. But one that I don't think maybe a lot of people know yet is that you're a part of an African pop band. Yes.
yeah, it's like we call it like Pan-African pop. It's very Caribbean heavy. I'd say it's more Caribbean heavy with some dashes of African rhythms added by me. But yeah.
Amazing. So tell us more about that. Tell us more about that. I know that you do it with a gentleman by the name of John Orpheus. And what does that project look like?
Yeah, so I met John, I think almost 5 years ago now. And so he's from Trinidad originally. And we met like randomly by fate one night at the Cameron House, which is like a great venue. It's like a very folk rock, rootsy kind of venue on Queen and Spadina. And I was playing in a couple different like country folk indie projects. So that's what he encountered me playing. I was just
Okay.
playing there on a Saturday night. He saw me, we connected. We realized within like 10 minutes of talking to each other that we had a lot of musical similarities and interests. So we became really good friends, and we talked a lot of philosophy, and we talked a lot, like a lot of our just worldviews aligned. We were very big into things like Pan-Africanism and intersectional feminism, and kind of built a relationship on that. And then like a lot of our musical interests too. We saw Lauryn Hill together. We seen like a bunch of dope people. We saw the internet
Nice.
together, Saint Beauty.
That's what's
And
up.
and from that relationship, we just, oh, hey, my mom just tuned in. Hi, mom.
Oh, hi,
Shout out to
Mom. Now we
Riegler.
can make an exception for Mom. We can say hi to Mom.
Yeah, have to shout out mom. Sorry. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so who knows John very well. And so yeah, so he already had a project going, and it was a huge band, like 10 people in it. And I started playing with him, and it was like a big band. It was like kind of a soul funky kind of thing. There was, you know, a horn section, there was a bassist,
Okay.
there was backup singer. It's just a whole bunch
Nice.
of different stuff.
Nice.
And that just transformed over time. So now there's just three of us. It's John, and then my like roommate, sister, bestie, Chanel Matisse, who's her background is Jamaican. So you have this very like in our songs, we call it, like I said, Pan African pop. So it's like
Okay.
pop and hip hop, but definitely
Right.
with a lot of dance hall, soca, and Afro beats just mashed
Okay.
up in there. Um,
Nice.
yeah, so a lot of the lyrics and a lot of the themes are very Caribbean and carnival heavy, but and then the rhythms, like we have a producer and the basis, like I went in the studio and recorded a bunch of West African rhythms, primarily from Ghana and Guinea, and I recorded them on like drums, on bells, on rattles, on
Okay.
shakers, clapping, and he just took like a bank of those rhythms of just me playing
Mm-hmm.
them, and that's what he used to create our songs.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different stuff happening in there. And so yeah, we've been playing together for a while now. And we started an event series called John Orpheus is the name of the band. It's also the name of my business partner, John Orpheus. We
Sure.
started an event series called House Orpheus
Okay.
3 years ago. Yeah, so that's
Excellent.
how I started doing events in the city was
Got you.
with
Got you.
John. Yeah, like there would be no Afro House if there wasn't House Orpheus
And
before
that's what
it.
I was just going to say. Where did the concept of Afro House come from? Because I hear the house and the house in both of them.
Hmm.
So tell us about the similarity between the two. How did one come out of the other or be birthed out of the other?
For sure, yeah. John would always joke, like he had it in his Facebook profile that he was the CEO of House Orpheus, and he is like
Okay.
John Orpheus is just like his stage name, you know. And so I'm like, why don't we call? We had the opportunity. There was this incredible art gallery. It's called Art Square Gallery. It's right across from the AGO. It's like Dundas University. We got an opportunity. The One of the owners used to play saxophone in our band, and he was
Nice.
like, hey, we want to give you the space to just like bring your community in here and do whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Because we've been putting on different nights. We had a couple nights that were like, we had this really cool triptych. We called it like a 3 event series at the Painted Lady years ago. And it was like hosted by comedians. There'd be live painters there, like painting, and then like would auction at the end. And then there'd also be performances.
Nice.
Dynasty Williams was one of our first people 4 years ago on that.
Hey.
Um, yeah, and so we were doing stuff like that, and then we got to bring it to this new home in this incredible art gallery. What a great space for events like this.
Yeah.
So
Sounds
yeah,
like it. I wish
so
I was here during that time. Ah,
I wish you were too. It was a really beautiful beginning to this movement, and we wanted to really root them in these two ideas of intersectional feminism and Pan-Africanism. And we love Afro-punk, so we look to Afro-punk a lot for kind of what they're doing and what they stand for. And we wanted to bring together that because, like, I obviously had this background in African music, but I wasn't super deep in the African community yet here.
okay.
Um, I was more deep actually in the hip hop community and the Caribbean community.
Got you.
So we wanted to create these events that would be like serving this like Pan African community and bringing people together of all backgrounds, but really prioritizing as far as like who we were giving the stage to be
Right.
primarily people of the Pan African diaspora.
But then
And
Afrobeat
so
took over.
yeah, so we did the House Orpheus events for a while. We did this really beautiful open mic night once a month. That was for almost 2 years called Speak Your Truth. That was one of the most powerful spaces I've ever been in. Just incredible artists, you know, a lot of spoken word, a lot of poetry, a lot of MCs and rappers, but we get comedians too. So we did a lot of those events for a while. And then I started DJing
Yeah.
kind of by accident. John kept on just calling me a DJ because I would like
Right.
select. Yeah.
Like,
It,
no, this isn't what it is. But now, like I said, one of the top DJs here in Toronto, honey. Look at how the universe works.
mhm. No, thank you. So I was just putting together Spotify playlists for these House Overviews events to play like in between. Like we would hire DJs. Dr. Mephisto from Ubuntu was one of our really steady DJs actually for all these House Orpheus events. But I would
Right.
like make Spotify playlists or whatever. And so I just kept doing that to the point where he's like, "You're a DJ, like accept it." And I was just
Right.
like, no.
Calling.
Um,
Calling.
yeah. So when the owners of this gallery, they knew that I had just started DJing. I literally had done like one gig. This is like 2.5 years ago. I done one gig, and then they're like, "Hey, Sarah, we want to have a meeting with you." And so they were like, "We want to start having like a Friday night event weekly, and you can just have the space, and we know you started DJing, like carte blanche, do whatever you
You
want."
can't hide anymore. Look at you trying to hide.
Yeah. So that's how Afro House started. It's like I literally it evolved at, and so I wanted to somehow tie it back into the House Orpheus roots. So that's why the house is spelled Haus, is because Afro House, and that was a genre that I felt there was a large gap in our scene here for just contemporary like popular music, like African music. I was
Right.
like, 'cause this was like a little bit over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. So like people were just starting to drop like Fall and If by DeVito. You could hear Come Closer by Drake and Wizkid, and that was about it.
Right.
That was really about it. And as far as like downtown parties, there'd be like a 1-2 Afrobeat song here and
Right.
there, but there
Right.
wasn't a lot of. There was like Ubuntu was definitely a thing, and then excuse my French, they were doing their own thing. So I don't want to say like there were nobody, of course, like that would be a lie. But I was like, but in those parties, like it wasn't just African music, and I'm like, I don't know
Mhm.
any parties that are just really prioritizing like what's coming out right now in Nigeria, what's coming
That's
out
true.
right now in South Africa, what's coming out right now in Angola, like where's that happening?
That's true.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, creating something out of the need and the demand. I know a lot of people are grateful for that. But I know that that can be challenging for you too. At times because I know that you have concerns even in this field about the stereotypical and colonial and European component regarding the creation of African music. Now that we are in a hot commodity and in demand, so I feel like for us at least, for me, my observation, I'm new to the city and I've been going to your events and I've been, and we've known each other for a while now. But I did really notice and appreciate the prioritization in a pure form of it's an acknowledgement of its origin, right? And I know that you have some concerns about that too. So why don't you think we see a lot of like African producers on the top charts? And maybe how does that make you feel?
Yeah, and we're talking when I saw say top charts, we're talking about things like Beatport. These are like electronic music. So we're talking
Right.
about like Afro House and Afro Tech.
Yeah.
So like more Southern African electronic music end of the spectrum here. Because I mean, yeah, now everybody
Yeah,
kind of
the
knows who
Western
Black Cross.
Africans, we're definitely taking. We're like, yeah, nah, we're done here. We're gonna claim it, and it's gonna be ours and only ours. But you're right there. But that's also in a cultural and historical context, right? Southern African music with their whole apartheid situation and the steady integration of their people, where whites say that they're African. That kind of integration means that there's a lot behind that. So yeah, how have you been dealing with those challenges, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts like where it really makes me, I mean, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of things that make me pissed off, but like in particular, I think like in the electronic music scene, which I mean, let's be real here, techno and house are both black genres and really, carried by like black queer communities and like ballroom scenes and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but now electronic music, a lot of the centers of it are like Berlin and Ibiza. So people now I
Right.
think that like electronic music is a white thing and a predominantly white thing, and like obviously there's a lot of pockets of it being like so in especially Europe. So the electronic music scene has these different charts on these websites where you can buy these music, places like Beatport. And what kills me is you go to like the top 50 tracks on Beatport and there's barely any names I recognize are mostly European
Right.
producers that are like making Afro House, and you don't see barely any African names on there. Even though I'm like, yo, there is just like a laundry list of people putting out incredible music. So it just,
Right.
I get pissed off. I feel like the electronic music scene, especially in Toronto too, not everybody, but some pockets of it that I see are pretty tone deaf, and everyone's now like Afro House is like the new hot thing. Everyone knows who Black
Right.
Coffee is now,
Of
but
course.
people judge what is Afro House and define what is Afro House on what is stereotypically African sounding versus the actual sounds that are coming out of Africa, which might not be like some of it's Afro. There's some Afro tech coming out right now that's like dark and grimy and like,
Yeah,
you
like just
know,
because you add a little bit of ooh, that doesn't make it Afro
exactly.
House.
They'll do like an African vocal sample or just have it be drum heavy and now it's Afro House,
Exactly.
now it's tribal house. And so that's why you get all of these European like producers dominating these charts because it's Afro House because they've like used a 1-2 little vocal loop or
Mm.
sample and now it's Afro House.
You know
Um,
what? Oh, yeah, that's deep. Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. This is about you, girl. But have you ever
no,
heard of
go
the
ahead.
group,
Let's hear
the
it.
group Deep Forest?
Deep
I don't know if you
Forest.
ever heard, yeah, Deep Forest. Have you ever heard of them? You should definitely
No.
check them out. They're like electronic music, but they use Aboriginal sounds, like
Yeah.
Australia, the Aborigines in Australia,
Hmm.
and they use like their sounds. So when I first started listening to them, they're one of my favorites, like musically. Like I sometimes try to separate the music from the artists, right? But in my unlearning, I realized you love Deep Forest. Check them out. They have a lot of like tribal sounds, but again, they're these Aboriginal sounds. And I started thinking, I thought they were like, two brothers or black people, I don't know. Like they'd sound like they're, and then I found there were these two French guys or two white guys. I was livid because I was like, unless I saw proof of like, you're going out into, but these are original sounds. So you're going out into those cultures and you're recording their everyday life. That's basically what they did. I started doing research. They would record, just sit around there, act like they were tourists chilling and record their sounds and then come back here and mix it. And they've become famous. They are like one of the top, electronic and techno and house music group out. World music, they call it. But I
Hmm.
don't know what contribution did you like help or donate any money to that village or help put any resources or anything in place? Are those people seeing the royalties that have made you guys fucking millionaires?
Yeah.
That
Well, think
started to
about
really
Paul.
upset me. And I love this group.
Yeah. I love this person so much. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, but Paul Simon's Graceland
Yeah.
with Lady Smith Black Mambazo from South Africa.
Yes.
There's a lot of cases of that. In my field, ethnomusicology, that I was talking about earlier, like we think about
Right.
these things a lot because like the field recordings, what you're talking about, people going out in the field and recording it. I mean, it's the same thing in academia. You go out and
I
like
get
do
the
these studies.
creativity, but you won't credit it as your own. Like you'll say fucking Deep Forest featuring the village of fucking somewhere in Australia, goddamn. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that's the big thing, and yeah, and that's something I think about too, because
And
even
that's
like I just said like,
exploitation. Those people don't even know that there's a world that they can get money off of their voices. That concept doesn't even exist. They're doing their traditional, they're doing traditional things, intimate
mhm,
spiritual cultural moments that they allow someone into and that person exploits them. And that's why I think a lot of black people are frustrated because you feel like it's infiltration, it's deceptive.
yeah, yeah. I have a lot of fear around myself doing that all the time too. I'm like, shit, am I like, what am I, and like I think we have to ask ourselves those questions all the time. Just like,
But I
how am I
think the
showing
fact that
up?
you're conscious and you're thinking that way, Sarah Love, is really like power. That's where it starts. That's really critical for us
Right.
to challenge and think. That's how it starts. How do you know something? How can you think about something if you don't even can't even fathom that it exists?
Exactly. But it's so important. Like everything you're saying is completely spot on. And it's like, that's something, yeah, it just gets so frustrating. And like the other side of it too is now the electronic music world. Like as I've encountered this personally. There was a specific moment actually at a gig I played.
Oh wait,
Um,
right there. Let me write down electronic music. Remember this topic. We're about to run out of time. I got my one
oh,
minute 50 or hour warning. So we're gonna be back here. We're gonna come right back in, guys. We're gonna be with Sarah for another 30 to 40 minutes at the most. So make sure you tune back in. We're having an amazing conversation. Y'all already know. Don't even act. You guys know what's up on the Sedalia and Jai show. All right, love. We'll bring you right back in. Okay.
sounds good. See y'all
All
in
right.
2 seconds.
Sounds
Bye.
good.